Welcome to Theology Unplugged. I'm Michael Patton, and this is our, what is this, our 19th? I don't even know, to tell you the truth. I'm losing count. We're doing so many of these. But I think it's our 19th session of Through Theology in a Year, where we're going through the entirety of all of systematic theology from beginning to end. So if you've ever felt guilty about not reading a systematic theology book from cover to cover, go through this with me every day, 30 minutes a day, around 30 minutes, and you're going to get through all of systematic theology. And I'm telling you, it will be just as detailed, if not more, unless you're Karl Barth. It's not going to be as detailed as he is, but or Aquinas, but we'd have to go through theology in 20 years for that. But maybe we'll keep on doing this, and maybe we won't get through in a year. We'll see. I'm not going too fast, as you guys can tell. But remember to subscribe. Remember to comment. Remember to do all those things that are necessary to get the algorithm running. And it seems like it is. It seems like it's working. It seems like you guys are doing stuff at the various places that you catch this podcast, this YouTube channel, wherever it is you catch this, on Facebook, wherever. Thank you for doing that. Keep on doing that. Any comment. Say thanks, or that stunk, or whatever. It will help out, because that's what the algorithm's like. Okay, we are continuing our study on the theological process. And as you have seen this complicated chart many times, you will continue to see it, because that is what we are going over, and I want you to know this backwards, forwards, and upside down, because it is so important. One of the most important things you can learn in theology is learning how to take the Bible through this process and derive theology out of the Bible when theology is present. Because in the end, aren't we asking every time we read the Bible, is this saying something about, is God saying something through this? That's kind of the question that we're asking. Is God saying something to us about himself or about us in this particular passage? And as I've said many times, that's not always true. He's not always saying something to us, but many times he is. And we got to learn to discern when it is that he's talking to us about our situations that will apply to our situations, and when it is that it is just talking about what happened, establishing foundations and history. And the Bible is not a systematic theology. The Bible is not a history book. The Bible is a very specific canon of the history of redemption, the fallen redemption of mankind. That's what it comes down to. And so whenever you're in most of it, what you're going to find is most of it is history. Most of it is telling the story. The story does. The big picture of the story tells so much to us that we have to learn. But we cannot treat the Bible like a magic book. The moment we start treating it like a magic book, all of a sudden our theology is going to be all over the place. And if we had good theology at that point, it is in spite of our methodology, not because of our methodology. So today I promised to start taking you through this process. Last time we took it through, the first time we went through, we talked about giving each other a holy kiss and how that goes through the process to a handshake. And then last time we talked about how women's head covering, while prayer has to do with the bigger picture, the bigger theological principle we extract of women's modesty and submission to their husband. And then we applied that today. It's easy. Once you get the theological principle, it's pretty easy to apply it today, as we'll see. Today we're going to talk about the first commandment. And we're going to go through the commandments. I don't know how many we're going to get through. We'll go through one a day for a while, and we may only go through 2 or 3. But we may keep on going just for a little bit until I feel like we've really exhausted this process to where you understand it and it's become a second nature to you whenever you read the Bible. It is second nature to me, but at the same time, it's still hard. It really is. I mean, it's easy in some ways because it becomes second nature. You're always looking for those principles. You're always asking the right questions of the text, but it's hard because it doesn't always answer them that clearly, sometimes very clear. Most important things are very, very clear. But sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we'll have disagreements, and that's where different types of theology emerge. But on the big things, we're all the same. Okay, so let's go to the process here. Remember, you go from clothed to unclothed to clothed again. Clothed in the ancient garment, whatever cultural expression a command or a principle has back in the day, we extract that, unclothe it, and then we reclothe it. I hope you guys like that, because I obviously am really proud of that particular slide. I think it, for me at least, it expresses exactly what it is that I'm trying to talk to you about. Okay, now clothed, unclothed, and clothed again. Now we're going to take it through this. We're going to go to the first commandment. And let me just read this. And then step by step, slowly, you and I together are going to walk through this process. And I think you're going to see it happen. I think it will be clear enough. And I think commandments are the best way to do this, because they have all of the elements of what we need to ask the questions that I need you to ask. Okay, so here's the questions, or here's what we're trying to discover: what they did, what to do, and what we do. So when we read this commandment, that's the question. But what's the first question we're asking? What's the first one in the series? It is what they did. So what is it that they did here? What is going on? Whenever we're talking about this particular commandment, we're asking questions of the text. And let me see how I have this real quick. Let me get back to me so that I can just look at this alone. Okay, this is it. And I'm going to show you this slide again real quick, and then we're going to go back to the commandment. So you have, what did it mean then? That's where we have to start, and we're asking all kinds of questions of the text: historical, grammatical, contextual, and literary questions of the text. And we ask all of these questions before we extract a timeless principle, if there is a timeless principle to extract. So let's go to the commandment. It says, "Then God spoke all of these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." So really, the commandment, the first commandment, is just verse 3. You shall have no other gods before me. Now we've got to get back and we say, wait a minute. What are these questions that we're asking of this particular text? What is going on at the time? The first thing we got to do is back up and say, okay, let's try to get the big picture. And we're going to do this way, and I'm going to assume that you guys know how to do this and that you know to do this. First of all, contextual, right? What is the context that this particular command is coming in? It doesn't come in a vacuum. It comes in a historical situation. Most of the Bible is history book, and you're going to have to study the history and see the big picture of what has happened and what is going to happen to be able to see the big picture. So you ask the question, what is going on? Now, I'd ask you this. Where is this command being given? Or first of all, who is this command specifically being given to? And you might say, Israelites. And I say, yeah, that's right. But who specifically? Oh, Moses, yeah. And where is Moses whenever he's getting this command? He is on Mount Sinai. What has happened to bring about this series of events where Moses is on top of a mountain, all of Israel is down at the bottom of the mountain, eagerly awaiting Moses to come back because they're scared because something is going on this mountain that has caused them great fear. So what is the situation? Well, you might say to me, Michael, it's the Exodus. The Exodus has happened. They've been delivered from the land of Egypt. The Red Sea has parted. They have been there for 400 years. Abraham went before him. Remember how Abraham and all their children, all of Abraham's children and the tribes of Israel, through the means of Joseph protecting them, they all end up in Egypt, and then they end up staying in Egypt because a Pharaoh comes into power that did not know Joseph. They ended up becoming slaves for 400 years, just like God predicted. They were there for 400 years, cried out to God. God brought Moses. Moses was divinely placed in this situation, and now Moses has delivered by the power of God, has brought Israel out of the land of Egypt where they were slaves. That's the situation, right? So Moses is sitting on the top of the mountain, and they're getting ready to do something. And I would ask you, I say, okay, tell me the historical situation after this. What's going on? What's going to happen? They say, oh, Michael, they're going into the land of Canaan, the promised land, the land that was given through a covenant to Abraham a long time ago. And we are all Abraham's children. All the people down at the bottom of the mountain are Abraham's children. They are the Israelites. And they know they're heading into the promised land. So they're coming out of Egypt and going into Canaan, okay, in the Middle East, taking a long trip. Okay, now that's some of the historical situation. Getting ready to inherit the promised land. Now, give me some of the context of this historical situation. I want to know what type of world they lived in at this time, because this is going to be very, very important. You want to understand the culture of the day. Now, remember, we're sitting here and we're looking at this passage, and all we're doing is looking at this one verse, really, you shall have no other gods before me. And so whenever we're looking at the Bible here, at the very first step, we're looking at the Bible, we're really having to travel throughout the Bible and behind the Bible and under the Bible, all the context, all the culture that is going around at the time, and we have to discover this. And this is what takes some legwork sometimes. Now, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you learn a lot of this in Sunday school, and it's not that difficult. But at the same time, to really deeply understand what kind of culture they are in, where are they coming from? They're coming from the land of Egypt. Tell me about Egypt. Well, Egypt had pharaohs, and tell me about Pharaoh. Well, Pharaoh was kind of seen as a god. He was the leader of the group. What kind of a god? Tell me about what their view of God is. Whenever you said the word God, because this is going to become very important in this passage, whenever you said the word God, what did they think? And then that's maybe whenever you scratch your head a little bit and you say, well, did they think the ultimate creator like we do? No, they didn't. It's not the same thing. See, whenever you and I think of the word God, you shall have no other gods, we think the one who created us. We think of we're in the Western world. We inherited a very Greek philosophy of God, which is okay. And I'll help you to understand this later on as the big picture of theology develops. But at the same time, that's the way we think. So we're sitting here in America, and we are thousands of years past this event. We are thousands of years, we would say, in advancement of understanding and the progress of understanding that God has given to us. And whenever we hear the word God, we think ultimate creator. We think in terms of this, the unmoved mover, because we're inheriting this from Aristotle, and we've got this idea only of God as being the ultimate creator. Yes, he can be all these other things we're going to talk about, but at the same time, the first thing we think of is ultimate creator, and we think it's really weird. It's very confusing for us whenever we hear this passage that says, you shall have no other gods before me, right? Because here's the way we think. Oh, that's easy. Why would I have any other gods? There can only be one God. You can't have an infinite regress, and you can't have multiple. There's all kinds of philosophical things that go into this that say there can only be one God. And so whenever you say, you shall have no other gods before me, we say, snap, I've got this one. Go to the next commandment. No problem. But that's how you would do it if you started in your context, if you started in the here and now, if you started today with your own clothes on and interpreted the word God. But we can't do that. We have to get back to the clothes that they wore and understand how they meant the term God. So we go, wait, okay, let's back up. How did they mean the term God? You just said Pharaoh was a god. Was he the ultimate creator? You'd say, no. They had a whole different theology in the day. In Egypt, is that what we're talking about? Yes, in Egypt. So tell me about the theology, the big picture theology of Egypt. Well, they were polytheistic, right? polytheistic. Generally speaking, I mean, there's some variations within the polytheism system, but polytheism is the main thing we need to understand. So I would ask you, okay, let's keep on building the culture. Let's keep on clothing this ancient guy so we understand exactly what it is that they heard, because this is the author's intent. God is speaking to the Israelites. He's not speaking to you. What would the Israelites have heard when they heard, "You shall have no other gods before me"? Tell me specifically. So they have a context in which they have a polytheism that they have inherited. Many gods. Even Abraham came from a land of Ur where there were many gods, and he gave up his gods. So it's a weird situation. And God doesn't automatically tell them straighten out the views all at once. I mean, if you have a bad theology, he'll tweak it all the way through the Old Testament into the New Testament until it's much more perfected. But if we go back here, God doesn't come in and say, you guys, why would you have any other gods? There can only be one creator God, that type of thing. He's talking to them in their context. What do they view as gods? Well, polytheism. The polytheistic structure is a very interesting structure because you have many different powers, many different superpowers, if you will. They weren't the creators. Sometimes there was an ultimate creator, kind of, but they didn't even think that way. They thought in such a way as, these are different resources we go to when we are in need of the basic things of life. Okay, that's their system. Where do these resources come from? I don't know. They're supernatural. Are they people? No, they're gods. They're supernatural. They have more power than we do. They demand our worship. And if we worship them well, they'll give us what we want within their category of what they can give, within their category of power. So you would have gods. You would have many gods. And I would say, why do you need many gods? Why not just one? Because each god is in control of a different aspect of life, a different power that has been given. He has been given authority over. So let me give you some examples. Remember, we're building out the history before we make the move to today. So we start with today. That's what we do. We say, I don't need this. I only have one God. I'm smart. Okay, so what do they have? They have many different gods, and each god controls a different element. So you might have the sun god, the god of the rain. You might have the god of fertility or the god of war. Well, what does all that mean? Well, each one of these gods was in control of this aspect of life. So if you were going to war, what would you need most? Whose power? Well, the war god. So you would have, that idol and that god and that one you went to, and that's who you worshiped before you went into battle. But what about if you were wanting to have children? Well, that's different. You'd have to have the fertility god. And the fertility god was the one who granted you the power to have children. And you understand today how important that was, especially for women, to have children. And what a status symbol, and also what just a basic livelihood it contributed to. So they would have their god and worship them whenever they don't have children. If you have plenty of children, maybe you never even talk to the fertility god. You don't need them. You wish like me, maybe the fertility didn't hit you so well and so perfectly. But for some people it doesn't. For some people they can't have children. And so they worship that god quite a bit. Even to the point where whenever they are engaged in copulating in order to have children, let me put this as benign as possible, they would have that god maybe above their mantle, above their bed, an idol of that god above their bed, because then that idol would do that. Okay, so we'll get into this more next time. So if the season was dry, if you weren't getting any crops, who would you go to? Well, you go to the rain god, that kind of thing. So you can see every single aspect of life was controlled by a particular god. That's what they heard That's what you got to understand. We're getting in their shoes. We're trying to understand the author's intent, and one of the best ways to do that is to understand how the readers of that day would have heard it. So whenever they hear this is very revolutionary to them. Whenever they hear God's first command, you shall have no other gods before me, this is an overwhelming change. Okay, they thought at first, Yahweh is going to be our God. You guys keep your gods, you go over there. We think ours is pretty powerful. We're not really sure what Yahweh does yet, what he's in control of, but we know he can split seas and he can beat up all the people of Egypt and challenge all the gods there because he wiped them out. He challenged them all and we beat them. And so whenever God's first command is this, hey, he says this. And I'm going to put it in different terms. No longer am I going to use the word God because it doesn't help us. Whenever it says, you shall have no other gods, that doesn't help me right now. And having, you shall have no other gods, that doesn't help me either. I want to change the wording as best I can to keep with the idea of the original, but break myself free of this suit and tie I'm wearing in the 21st century. So, how do we do this? Well, let's take it this way. Let me go back here. Here's where we're at. What did it mean then? You shall have no other gods before me. In a context of polytheism, in a context in which this is just the way they thought, in a context that God is not going to correct all of their theology at once. He's going to let them think this way to a certain degree. That's a hard thing to understand about the development of theology within the Bible. It's sometimes called the intracanonical development of theology. You have progressive revelation. You have God not revealing everything at once, like we might say, but slowly chipping away at their theology, making it better and better and better. That's why everything's not corrected at once. That's why you can read in the Old Testament and be very confused with what God allows or why he doesn't correct things, because he's chipping away, and he's doing it at his own pace. So here we are in this quadrant. Would it be called a quadrant? A thirdrant. Okay, so here's the way I put it, okay? This is notice the wording I use. I was very intentional about the words here. What did it mean then, if you were to ask me? I would say this: Yahweh, Israel's new covenanted Caesarean. Okay, what am I mean by that? Let's stop there. God is implementing what is called a Caesarean vassal treaty. Now, you say, what in the world is that, Michael? This isn't something you necessarily have to understand, but it's helpful. It's deeper within the history. It's deeper within the whole culture of the day, where what would happen was their kings, their rulers would come in and make a covenant with the people, and they'd say, very normal. I mean, Israel hearing we're getting this covenant that we're given to us, and we've been offered this covenant. God said, if you follow me, you saw how I carried you on eagle's wings. If you follow me and do what I say, I will be your God. They said, yep, let's do it. Caesarean vassal treaty, a Caesarean covenant we're making with our God. That's normal, because the kings would make it with their people and say, listen, if you be my people and my subjects, I will provide all of this for you, and give a list. Here's all the list of what I'll provide, as long as you do this. And they gave a list of what they provided. It's very, very important for this covenant that is being made, called the Mosaic covenant. This is the first statement of this treaty that has been made between Israel and Yahweh. So, God, Yahweh, Israel's new covenant Caesarean, told his people that they are not to have any source or power of authority. Notice what I did there. Any source or power of authority. That is important. I tried to change the word God because, again, show it the dress of the day there. We're trying to morph it around so that we understand it. We understand what they're wearing, why they're wearing it. The clothing of the day is different than our day. Any source or power of authority that trust in as Yahweh is comprehensively, here's another one, this is important, Yahweh's coming in and saying, I am comprehensively here. I am the comprehensive God. And this is one of the reasons why you hear him say El Shaddai. That's a name of it. The Lord, not just the Lord, not just the El, but the El Shaddai, the Lord God Almighty. What in the world is that? The Lord God, remember, chipping away at their theology. God is coming in, he's telling them, I comprehensively meet all your needs. Comprehensively. This is revolutionary for them if they would have really grabbed a hold of this. It was too hard though. They were too caught up in the culture, and as they're getting as he is getting this covenant from God up on the mountain, and they're all waiting anxiously, they get scared and start building idols. At that point, they start turning back to the old way right then, because they don't know what to do, because that's the way they do things. They and it has a lot to do with next time, a whole lot to do with next time. But this one here is just, you're getting into their culture. Notice how we've clothed ourselves, and we're just sitting here right now, and we're clothed just like they would have been at this time in the ancient world. And understanding it, God's coming in and saying, I take care of everything. So if we're right on this, because this is the hardest part, this first part right here, this step is the hardest step. And we got to make sure we're right, because if we mess up here, every other step is messed up. So we probably spend the majority of our time, almost every time we are studying Scripture, in this first place. So if we are right, and I am right, that I have interpreted this correctly, then we can go to what did it mean, or what does it mean? We've come to a conclusion on what did it mean then, so what does it mean? Let's look. We can interpret this now and try to strip it of all its baggage. Remember, we're taking all the clothes back off, and we're going to try to be as generic as possible and restate this same thing, but without the cultural baggage. Here we go. And this wipe out. People are to lean comprehensively on God. Notice that, people, not Israelites anymore. It's people. Because I think we can take this and make it a universal covenant, because I don't think God only, as we see later, cares only about Israel. But he wants people to lean comprehensive on God, knowing that he is the ultimate source of all their needs. Makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, here's God, and he's saying, I am the ultimate source of everything. I am the ultimate source of all your needs. Now today, once we take this and we say, how does it apply to us? Now it's much different, isn't it? We're not going to say, well, that doesn't apply to me because I have never worshiped another God. I've been to church, Sunday school all my life, and it's been the Bible God, that kind of thing. You're missing the point. You're missing the point, because you still do. If we're right and this is correct, then are there other sources that you lean on, possibly more than God, for your hope? You might say, no, I don't know. God's everything. Oh, yeah? Well, who do you go to first whenever you're sick? Who do you go to first whenever you need money? Who do you go to first whenever you need children? That kind of stuff. You see, we think God's kind of secondary in some of these things. And we say, yeah, well, God's important in general, but in specific, we're going to have to go to all these things. And I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying we don't use these things, but we don't put them before God. He is the ultimate source of all of our needs. And if all of this is true, and then we begin to say, how does it apply to us? There is a multiplicity. I mean, you could write an entire sermon and preach this sermon all day long based upon this last, how does it apply to us? We are not to put our ultimate hope in any other source of provision, sustenance, or power other than our God. He is our hope, not doctors. He is our hope, not 401ks. He is our hope, not our children or our spouse. I could go on and on with things that you and I put. If our definition of God here has been correct, if we've gone through the theological process, well, and it is an ultimate source of trust because of the way the culture saw it, then we have so many gods. We have so many things we look to before him. And I was just sitting here preparing this, and I know we're out of time here, but I was preparing this, and beforehand I began to talk to my sister. And I said, I can't hardly get through this lesson. And I said, because I'm so bad at this. I'm so bad because earlier today I'm sitting here worried about something. You know, we've got our air conditioner down and in our entire house. I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world are we going to be able to pull this off, get money to be able to pay for this? On and on it goes in my mind. And with all the provisions and everything else, God kind of comes up last. And you know, I'm not saying it's magic. You ask him and then all of a sudden you take care of it. But do I see him as really the ultimate source? He usually that's my lack of trust. That's my lack of that word usual, that contention, that word that is not very good when we talk about God. That was perfect for me to say. He usually comes through for me. He always comes through for me. He always has. But that's what I say in my mind. He usually does. It probably will this time. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I trust in all kinds of other things too. I'm fighting this commandment every day, and maybe you are too. We have lots of other things we put before God. We have lots of other things that we trust in to meet our needs, to make us happy, for purpose, everything else. And he kind of comes in afterwards, and here he comes right here in this passage, which applies directly to us today. Yes, we can be polytheistic in this very same sense as long as we understand it. And yes, we are polytheistic in this very same sense as long as we understand it. So, if I am correct, and if we've gone through this process correctly, and this whole thing works, if this is good, if you took a snapshot of this and said, all right, this works, then we have a theology. We have a big picture. Now, I didn't go through and talk about the analogy of Scripture, which is the next step. And I wanted to go through the process one more time, big picture, and then next time we'll get into it even a little bit more detailed, looking at the second commandment, which, at least for Protestants, and I am a Protestant, I do believe this is correct because of what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, but it talks about you shall not have any idols. And the question I want you to ask until then, here's the question I'm going to leave you with. Why does God say you shall have no other gods? And then next, second commandment say, you shall have no other idols. Isn't that already covered in the first commandment? If I don't have any other gods, don't I not have any other idols? You see, we're not doing this well if we think that way. I'll show you tomorrow how this works out. I hope this has been beneficial for you. I hope that you see this need of this process and how important it is for us to take something like this chart, and use it well. I mean, and understand that this is part of this is one of the most important things that we can do in theology. Theology is the most important thing we can have in life. Therefore, what we're doing here is very important. I hope to see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget whatever. I mean, if you enjoy this, I'd love to hear it, if that's the comment. Also, don't forget to check us out at credoministries.org. That's the big picture of all of our ministries. But the most specific way, if you're going through this and you say, Michael, this is good, I'm going to keep on going through it with you. If you can, if it's possible, so that I can get an air conditioner. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, it is kind of, but at the same time, I need your support. Okay, I need your support. I trust God, and I hand this over to God, even though I say He's sometimes comes through and meets my needs. But anyway, support patreon.com/C Michael Patton. If you wanted to find me anywhere, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok /C Michael Patton after each one of those. I've got a monopoly on the C Michael Patton. Mike Patton is the lead singer of Faith No More, and he's got a monopoly above me whenever it comes to the Mike Patton or Michael Patton. So I have to go with C Michael Patton. But that's my name, Christopher Michael Patton. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.